The shrill sound of a camera shutter broke the peaceful Saturday morning silence. I peered through my living room blinds to witness an infuriating sight. A middle-aged woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair was meticulously photographing my newly installed copper and oak mailbox from multiple angles, her face twisted in righteous indignation. Before I could process what was happening, my doorbell rang with 3 aggressive rapid-fire bursts. I opened the door to find her standing there, red-faced and trembling with barely contained rage. "This," she snarled, thrusting a crumpled paper into my chest, "is a serious violation. Your unauthorized mailbox is disrupting neighborhood aesthetics and property values. I've already filed a formal complaint with the HOA. You have 24 hours to remove it or face a $500 fine." I glanced down at the paper in my hand, then back at Karen's triumphant smirk. She had no idea that I was the one who had drafted the mailbox regulations for this neighborhood 3 years ago. My name is Michael Chen, a 38-year-old architectural designer who has called Oakwood Estates home for the past 5 years. After graduating from Cornell with honors, I spent a decade working for prestigious firms before starting my own boutique design studio, specializing in sustainable luxury homes. My meticulous attention to detail and appreciation for harmonious aesthetics led me to volunteer for the HOA board shortly after moving in, where I helped draft several community guidelines, including the infamous mailbox regulations. My personality tends toward the diplomatic. I value order and consistency, but despise petty tyranny. My home renovation had just been completed last month, the culmination of a year-long project that transformed my modest ranch-style house into a modern craftsman masterpiece. The copper and oak mailbox was the final touch, custom designed to complement the home's natural materials and clean lines. The woman at my door was Linda Peterson, though everyone in the neighborhood had taken to calling her Karen behind her back. At approximately 50 years old, she had moved into Oakwood Estates just 3 months ago, following what neighborhood gossip suggested was a bitter divorce. Despite being the newest resident, she had swiftly appointed herself as the unofficial neighborhood monitor, though she held no actual position on the HOA board. Karen's signature look was unmistakable. Perfectly styled blonde bob that never moved in the wind, oversized designer sunglasses perched on her nose, regardless of weather conditions, and an endless collection of pastel polo shirts tucked into white capri pants. Her Mercedes SUV could often be spotted crawling slowly down streets as she documented perceived infractions with her expensive camera. Oakwood Estates was an exclusive community of 120 homes, nestled in the suburbs of Portland. The HOA, while strict, had always been reasonable under the leadership of Tom Williams, a retired judge with a fair-minded approach to community governance. Before Karen's arrival, residents enjoyed a friendly, supportive atmosphere where block parties were common and neighbors genuinely looked out for each other. The community took pride in its aesthetic cohesion, with tasteful landscaping and architectural guidelines that enhanced rather than restricted homeowners' expression. Mailboxes, visible from the street, were considered an important design element that contributed to curb appeal. Karen's crusade against neighborhood violations had begun almost immediately after moving in. She had reported the Johnsons for their children's basketball hoop, unsightly sports equipment, complained about Miss S. Garcia's floral curtains' inappropriate color scheme visible from street, and even called animal control on Mr. Wilson's perfectly legal backyard chickens potential health hazard. My mailbox became her latest obsession after I installed it last week. Though it fully complied with HOA regulations which I had helped write, Karen deemed it ostentatious and disruptive to neighborhood harmony. Our first confrontation had occurred when I caught her measuring my mailbox with a tape measure without permission, leading to a terse exchange that apparently escalated to this morning's dramatic confrontation. Karen's harassment campaign intensified with alarming speed. By Monday morning, every HOA board member had received a lengthy, hyperbolic email detailing my mailbox's alleged violations, complete with close-up photos and dramatic language about community standards under attack and precedent-setting disregard for regulations. When I returned home from work that evening, I discovered a garish orange sticker affixed to my mailbox, declaring violation notice in bold letters. Though it mimicked official HOA formatting, the amateurish printing and lack of proper letterhead revealed it as Karen's homemade creation. Still, several neighbors had seen it, creating exactly the public embarrassment she intended. The following morning, Karen ambushed me in my driveway as I was leaving for work. Blocking my car's path with her body, she demanded an emergency discussion about the ongoing mailbox situation. When I politely explained I was late for an important client meeting, she scoffed that community standards should be everyone's priority and reluctantly moved aside only when I started my engine. Throughout the week, neighbors reported seeing Karen photographing my mailbox from various angles, measuring its dimensions with a tape measure, and even taking soil samples from around its base for reasons no one could fathom. Her dedication to this bizarre crusade would have been almost admirable if it weren't so deeply disturbing. The situation escalated further when Karen created a private neighborhood chat group ominously titled Preserving Oakwood's Standards. Several newer residents were added and bombarded with messages suggesting I received special treatment due to my former HOA board position. Why should some people get to ignore the rules while the rest of us comply? She wrote, alongside unflattering photos of my home and mailbox. By Thursday, Karen had distributed a counterfeit official HOA notice to several homes on my street. The document, which illegally used the HOA logo, warned of a comprehensive mailbox audit and suggested fines for non-compliance. Tom Williams was unfortunately on a week-long fishing trip in Montana, leaving the HOA temporarily without its most level-headed leader. In a desperate attempt at reconciliation, I invited Karen for coffee to discuss the situation. She arrived with a 3-inch binder labeled Violations Documentation and refused to listen to my explanation about the mailbox's compliance with regulations. Instead, she insisted there were secret bylaws that I was purposely ignoring and accused me of corrupting the HOA during my tenure. When I asked to see these alleged secret regulations, she claimed they were confidential and accessible only to serious HOA members. My longtime neighbors, the Garcias and the Patels, expressed growing concern about Karen's behavior, with Miss S. Garcia confiding that she felt uncomfortable letting her children play outside when Karen was patrolling the streets with her camera. The once friendly atmosphere of our community was deteriorating under the weight of Karen's vigilante enforcement. The breaking point came Friday afternoon when my neighbor, Sarah, called in a panic. "Michael, there's someone messing with your mailbox. Karen is watching from her car across the street." I rushed home to find a man in painter's coveralls attempting to spray paint my beautiful copper mailbox a flat black. Sarah had confronted him just in time, and he quickly packed up his supplies and drove away when I arrived. That evening, a formal notice appeared in my email inbox. Karen had somehow convinced 2 junior HOA board members to call an emergency meeting for Monday evening to address ongoing aesthetic violations threatening property values. The subject of discussion? My mailbox. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the original HOA documents I'd helped draft years ago, and made a decision. If Karen wanted a fight over a mailbox, I would give her one, but not in the way she expected. I began methodically gathering evidence, photographs of my mailbox alongside the exact specifications in the HOA guidelines, testimonials from neighbors about Karen's harassment, and most importantly, video footage from my security camera showing the attempted vandalism of my property. As I worked late into the night preparing my defense, I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Karen had no idea what she had started or who she was up against. The devastating blow came Sunday evening. I had been visiting my sister across town when my phone erupted with alerts from my home security system. Racing home, I arrived to find a horrifying scene. My mailbox had been forcibly removed from its post, leaving a jagged hole in the ground. The beautiful copper box lay dented and scratched on my lawn, surrounded by scattered mail soaking in the evening dew. My security cameras had captured everything in high-definition clarity. Two men in unmarked overalls had arrived in a white van, used power tools to detach the mailbox, and unceremoniously dumped its contents onto the grass. Most disturbingly, Karen could be seen supervising from her SUV, parked across the street, occasionally directing the men with hand gestures, before driving away once the destruction was complete. With trembling hands, I gathered the scattered mail. Bills, advertisements, and a small package lay strewn across the wet grass. Then my heart stopped. Among the scattered papers was a pale blue envelope, now soaked through with muddy water. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. Mom had passed away from cancer 3 months ago. During her final weeks, she had mentioned writing letters for me to receive after she was gone, but this was the first to arrive. Now the precious envelope sat in my hands, its contents likely ruined by water and mud. I sank to my knees on the wet grass, cradling the damaged envelope. Tears blurred my vision as I carefully tried to separate the sealed edges without tearing the fragile paper. Inside was a birthday card. My birthday was next week, with a handwritten note that was now partially illegible, the ink bleeding across the page. My dearest Michael, I could still make out. I may not be there for your birthday, but I want you to know how proud I am. The rest had dissolved into blue, tinged smudges. A gentle hand touched my shoulder. Sarah, my neighbor, stood beside me with tears in her eyes. I saw what happened, she said softly. I recorded it on my phone. This isn't right, Michael. Within an hour, my living room filled with neighbors I hadn't even realized were watching out for me. The Garcias brought dinner. Mr. Patel, a retired attorney, took detailed notes about the incident. Miss S. Wilson, from across the street, revealed that Karen had also harassed her about her garden gnomes last week, threatening to report her to the city for unauthorized lawn ornaments. One by one, neighbors shared their own Karen stories, incidents of bullying, threats, and harassment they'd experienced over the past 3 months, but had been too intimidated to report. The pattern was clear. Karen targeted those she perceived as vulnerable or unlikely to fight back: elderly residents, busy families with young children, and non-native English speakers. She picked the wrong mailbox this time, said Mr. Patel with unexpected fierceness. This is not just about a mailbox anymore. This is about standing up to a bully. As my neighbors rallied around me, something shifted in my perspective. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was about protecting our community from someone who used fear and intimidation to control others. The damaged letter from my mother felt symbolic. Karen hadn't just attacked my property. She had desecrated something deeply personal and irreplaceable. I called Tom Williams that night, interrupting his fishing trip, to explain the situation. His normally calm voice turned steely as I described the escalating events, particularly the destruction of my mother's final letter. I'm cutting my trip short, he said firmly. This has gone far beyond HOA matters. Document everything, Michael. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, surrounded by printouts of HOA regulations, security camera footage, and neighbor testimonials. I carefully placed my mother's damaged card in a plastic sleeve, a painful reminder of what this fight was truly about. Tomorrow would be the HOA meeting Karen had demanded, but it wouldn't go the way she expected. Have you ever been harassed by a Karen in your neighborhood? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. Monday evening arrived with thunderstorm warnings, a fitting backdrop for the showdown ahead. I arrived at the community center 30 minutes early, armed with a meticulously organized binder of evidence and a USB drive containing security footage. Tom Williams was already there, his fishing trip cut short, looking grim as I briefed him on the weekend's events. I've been reviewing the HOA bylaws on the flight back, Tom said quietly. What Karen orchestrated isn't just a violation of HOA rules. It's criminal property damage and harassment. As board members and residents filed in, the tension in the room was palpable. More than 40 neighbors had shown up in unprecedented attendance for an HOA meeting. Karen arrived last, making a theatrical entrance in a crisp white pantsuit, struggling under the weight of an oversized presentation board covered with a black cloth. Her confident smile faltered momentarily at the unexpected crowd, but quickly reasserted itself. Tom called the meeting to order, explaining that Karen had requested this emergency session to address alleged violations regarding my mailbox. With exaggerated courtesy, he invited her to present her case first. Karen approached the podium with practiced indignation, dramatically unveiling her presentation board to reveal enlarged photos of my mailbox alongside highlighted excerpts from HOA guidelines. For 15 excruciating minutes, she detailed my supposed violations with the fervor of a prosecutor. In a murder trial, the mailbox was 2 inches taller than regulation, excessively ornate, and disruptively reflective in direct sunlight. Her performance reached its crescendo as she demanded the board impose the maximum fine of $500 and require immediate removal of the offensive structure. For good measure, she added a list of other residents who deserve similar scrutiny for their own mailbox infractions. When she finally finished, Karen returned to her seat with a self-satisfied smile, nodding to her small cluster of supporters. Tom thanked her for her presentation, then delivered the twist no one saw coming. Before we hear from Michael, the first should inform everyone that he was actually the primary author of our community's mailbox regulations when he served on the board 3 years ago. A murmur rippled through the room as Karen's face froze in mid-smile. I approached the podium calmly, connecting my laptop to the projector. "I'd like to start by showing some security footage from yesterday evening," I said quietly. The room fell silent as the high-definition video played, clearly showing Karen directing the removal and destruction of my mailbox. Gasps and whispers filled the room when I explained about my mother's ruined letter. Several of Karen's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats, distancing themselves from her. Next, I displayed the original mailbox regulations alongside detailed measurements of my installation, confirming it was fully compliant. Then came the bombshell recent photos of Karen's own mailbox, which violated no fewer than 5 HOA guidelines regarding materials, dimensions, and placement. "I haven't filed any complaints about these violations," I explained, "because unlike some, I believe in approaching neighbors with respect before escalation." Finally, I presented evidence of Karen's forgery of official HOA documents, unauthorized use of the HOA logo, and distribution of false information to residents. Karen's face had transformed from smug to stunned to furious. She leapt to her feet, shouting about conspiracy and favoritism, but her protest died as Tom calmly asked if she denied directing the destruction of my property on camera. "That mailbox was in violation," she sputtered, inadvertently confessing to the act. "So you admit to authorizing the removal?" Tom asked. Karen's face drained of color as she realized her tactical error. When Tom mentioned potential legal charges for property destruction, forgery, and harassment, she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit. "This meeting isn't over, Miss S. Peterson," Tom called after her, but the slamming door was her only response. The room erupted in applause as Tom called for a vote on my mailbox. The result was unanimous. My installation was approved and deemed fully compliant with community standards. The aftermath of the mailbox showdown, as neighbors now jokingly called it, brought swift and satisfying justice. The HOA board unanimously voted to require Karen to pay $1,200 in damages, covering both the physical repair of my custom mailbox and additional compensation for the emotional distress of my mother's ruined letter. Karen was also required to issue a formal written apology to be published in the community newsletter. Her grudging 3-sentence statement hardly qualified as sincere, but its publication marked a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing that seemed to pain her more than the financial penalty. The board also enacted new anti-harassment guidelines, with specific language prohibiting unauthorized photography of private property, forgery of official documents, and vigilante enforcement of HOA rules. These became informally known as the Karen clauses. 2 weeks after the meeting, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. Neighborhood gossip, primarily from her real estate agent's assistant who lived down the street, revealed that Karen was legally required to disclose the HOA dispute to potential buyers, causing several interested parties to withdraw their offers. Meanwhile, my restored mailbox, now slightly more ornate than the original, became something of a local landmark. Several neighbors commissioned similar designs for their own homes, creating a trend that ironically fulfilled Karen's prophecy about my mailbox, setting a precedent. In a particularly sweet turn of events, the HOA board invited me to rejoin as vice president at their next election, a position I accepted with a commitment to fostering community dialogue before conflict. Perhaps the most meaningful resolution came in the form of a community effort. When neighbors learned about my mother's damaged letter, several who had known her organized a memory book, collecting stories and photos that captured her spirit far better than any single card could have. The leather-bound volume now sits on my mantle, a testament to how a community can transform loss into connection. Karen's house remained on the market for 6 months, eventually selling for well below asking price. Rumor has it, she moved to a neighborhood without an HOA, a mercy to all parties involved. Sometimes justice takes time, but it does eventually arrive, especially when you know the rules better than those trying to weaponize them against you. Understanding your rights and regulations is the strongest defense against neighborhood bullies who mistake pettiness for power. As this experience taught me, a united community will always be stronger than a solitary intimidator. The mailbox that Karen tried to destroy ultimately became a symbol of our neighborhood's renewed solidarity. Have you ever faced a Karen in your community? How did you handle the situation? Share your experiences in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up to entitled behavior and protecting your rights. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next video on how to effectively document harassment for potential legal action. Thank you for watching my story. See you in the next video.